Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Good topic today. Let's go for it. Those of you who work the night shift, what's the scariest experience you've ever had? Please remember to like, share, say hi, and subscribe. I was working day shift on a drilling rig in the middle of nowhere. The rig manager comes to me and tells me I have to switch to nights on boiler watch to supervise the new guy and make sure all the assigned tasks are completed. Apparently, he failed to complete his shift list the night before, so now I'm on nights. I work with this kid, and he seems good, a guy with a solid work ethic. I can't understand why he failed the previous night. We completed all the work inside, and now it was time to go get a few things done outside. I tell him, let's get after oil changing that loader. He tells me that he can't work outside in the dark. I kinda laugh and say, we're definitely going to go do that oil change. He's scared, real fear. I ask him why and he tells me. Keep in mind that this rig is in the middle of nowhere, hours to the closest small town out of the bush. His story went like this. He had done everything asked of him inside, then went and started working out of the building on the lease outside. He got hungry, so he grabbed his lunch. He left an apple on the hood of the truck, then walked away for a few minutes. When he came back, the apple was still on the hood of the truck, but there was now a bite out of it. He looked on the ground and there were human shoe prints leading out of the trees, to the truck and back into the trees. We're in the middle of nowhere, and there is no way someone should be out there in the bush in that temperature at that time of night. So I start thinking that means somebody was watching him from the darkness of the trees and took the time to mess with him. This person is either the funniest guy alive or a super strange bushman. Looking at where we were, the chances of him being the funniest guy ever were very slim. So now we have a strange man in the bush watching us. As a 6'4", 260-pound rig hand, I'm weirded right out by this story. Sent a shiver up my spine when I realized how that must have gone down. We went, and the footprints were still there. We changed the oil, but we both had pipe wrenches as weapons in case we had a visitor. Still creeps me out to this day. Worked at a school bus company on graveyard shift. I lived in a place where it was commonly minus 20 degrees Fahrenheit or colder, and we were expected to clear snow and throw salt and then start, fuel, and stage the buses. There was a hole in one of our perimeter fences and management knew about it and decided that the horrible lighting and obsolete CCTV was enough of a deterrent. One night, it was close to minus 45 degrees with the wind chill factor, and it was so cold that even the winter blend diesel fuel was not wanting to flow very well. Took forever to get through the fleet, but we got it done. Usually at this point, we were expected to do a walkthrough on the lot to a security measure. Went out when it was my turn to take a pass, and I heard something fumbling about near one of the buses. I figured it was a rabbit or a squirrel or something and didn't really think to be on guard. As I walk past the back corner of the bus, I see a guy in chest waders and a hoodie with a straw hat on in the process of siphoning fuel from one of the buses, and I lit him up with a 1500 lumen flashlight and told him to kick rocks as I radioed the supervisor to call the police. The guy jumps up and starts screaming incoherently at me, and I realized the dude was high out of his mind. I gathered this already, but I had pretty solid confirmation at this point. I begin to get ready to take off as he starts to charge at me with a tire iron. Guy takes 3 steps and slips ass over tea kettle and splits the back of his head open on the pavement. He jumps back up and takes off through the hole in the fence. Cop showed up and took my statement. Boss came in and he was absolutely not surprised that something happened. At this point, he told me that company policy strictly forbids us to have a weapon of any kind on our person while on the property. He then stated that if it doesn't know, he can't say anything, but he wouldn't let me get crucified if I had to use one. I used to work in a large department store, and every year before the Thanksgiving Black Friday sales, we'd go in on Wednesday afternoon and work until midnight to get the store ready. The main lights would all go off after the store's normal closing hours, leaving us working by just a few dim bulbs dotted throughout the store, which made for a lot of spooky dark corners. One year we had a skeleton crew, just me and 3 or 4 other people to do the whole store, so we split up. I was out on the floor, our manager was in her office, and my other coworkers were either in the back of their designated areas of the store. At some point I looked up and across the floor to the opposite side of my area. The store was mostly one big open space, and I could easily see over the tops of all the shelves and clothing racks. As I was looking across the space, I saw an arm reach up over one of the racks and wave. It was a creepy sight, because whoever it was would have had to crouch behind one of the racks to avoid being seen, and then reach their arm up over top. And I could see so much of the arm, like all the way to the shoulder. So I really don't know how anyone could have managed that. I waited to see if it was one of my coworkers, but I didn't see anyone come out of that section. I knew none of my coworkers should have been in my area, and we all certainly had better things to do than hide behind racks waving at each other. I called a coworker and asked her to go with me to that section, but we didn't find anyone. I chalked it up to being tired, and my eyes playing tricks on me in the dimly lit store, but shit was creepy. Could have been a mannequin arm, could have been somebody messing with you a little bit, could have been a hallucination. What do you guys think it was? Working in a hospital late at night building a new cabinet for IT. On a deserted ward, all patients were 3 floors below, and the only access to the ward area was via smart card RFID onto a door for inside the doors. So, only people inside the ward can let anybody in. The layout of the ward is that it's completely open without any beds or kit in it, and the only cupboard was the one I was in, with the door propped open with a fire extinguisher. So I was working on installing the UPS, very effing heavy, into the rack, and the door to the cupboard shuts. I think, I must have kicked the fire extinguisher or something. I put the UPS down and opened the door, and the fire extinguisher is just gone. I look around and it's deserted. No noise, didn't hear anything. Fire extinguisher has just de-atomized into the ether. I call security because I'm potentially alone with a person who just lifted a fire extinguisher and might want to murder me with it. I ask them to check cams, and sure enough, some blurry object, according to them, swooped and picked up the fire extinguisher and ran off to the left. There are only 2 doors in and out of the ward, and you need a smart card to get in and out. I checked mine and was still on my person, and it was. So whatever or whomever it was must have had one or some kind of device to spoof the RFID chip reader. I had security run the access control logs, and sure enough, an entry in the list corresponds with roughly the time the fire extinguisher disappeared. I never got an answer as to what happened before I left to work somewhere else. Spooky. When I worked as a nursing aide in a hospital, there was a night where one of the call lights in one of the empty rooms kept getting triggered. I walked into the room and turned it off. The room felt eerie. I just wanted to get out of there. Walked back to the nursing station and it went off again. Happened 2 or 3 times. Was the only time I had experienced that while working there. It was an older hospital. Nights were mostly quiet, but some nights you'd hear sounds or think you saw something in the shadows. Definitely had the eerie vibe. I worked at a smash burger in Mesa, Arizona. We had 2 different female employees request not to close anymore. Of course, we asked why. First one, the store assistant GM no less, said that she was leaving after a long Saturday night close. It was pouring rain, and it was only her car and another in the parking lot. As she walked to her car, the guy in the other car got out and just stared at her as she got into hers. The second employee, a 16-year-old, told an even scarier encounter. A dude came in and asked her when she was off. Luckily, a manager was up front and heard, and quickly told the dude that we aren't legally allowed to give that information, even about ourselves. He sat in the dining room without ordering for a few minutes and then left. That night, this girl was followed home by a car. She said she did the 4 lefts thing, so she was certain. She apparently called her dad and had him waiting outside the house with a gun when she pulled in and the car kept driving. The first girl didn't get a good look at the guy, but both reported him having a gray minivan. My first night closing at the store, I was by far the last person there. It was well into the morning, and let me tell you, the way my stomach dropped when I was about to walk outside and a gray minivan was parked right next to my car. Police were called, but they unfortunately couldn't do anything but tell him to leave, and let him know we'd press charges if he came back, as it was technically private property. As far as I know, he's never been back, but man, it was scary. Again, another explanation or reason to think that of all the things in nature and all the predators out there, there's nothing scarier than humans. Okay, so I, 25 female, work night shift at a maximum security psychiatric hospital. As you can probably imagine, these kind of experiences come with the territory. To set the scene for you, the hospital I work at was built in the 50s as an asylum. The concrete walls are cold and sound echoes throughout with relative ease. The pressure differentials between units and the main hall create a haunting howling sound as the air escapes through the cracks under the doors. We typically keep the lights out to encourage patients to sleep through the night, and then there's me, walking the halls alone to check that everyone is still breathing. I've heard people laughing to themselves, whispering conversations to someone unseen by me. I've even ran to emergencies where other patients have snuck into another room to beat them violently, having to pull a 300-plus pound man off another man he attacked in his sleep, all the while he was still stomping on his head. But the scariest thing was when I was doing a round and I came across one of our blind patients. You know how in movies you see people with hallucinations that cut their eyes out looking for relief? No, I didn't find a pair of peepers freshly gouged out, if that's what you were thinking. However, this patient had in fact done exactly this a number of years ago, and as a result was completely blind. The worst part is, it didn't make the hallucinations go away. Now all he can see are the haunting visions that brought him to it in the first place. So, this patient had been with us for some time, and every night I walk by his room, he's in the same position, standing facing the wall with his back to the door. No matter how long I stand there, he doesn't move. This is nothing new though, as I've seen a number of patients with catatonia before. They just stand or sit there with a blank or sometimes fearful expression and react to nothing. So, the scary part for me was when I passed by his room, walking quietly so as not to wake any patients, and I peek into his room through the window. He's standing facing the wall. Just before I'm about to continue on with my rounds, I see his head turn, like he heard a voice. He turns around with his empty eye sockets and looks at me. "My name, is that you?" I nearly shit myself. I didn't even know this patient knew my name, let alone that he could tell someone that it was me from standing there. I probably should have reassured him that I was real, but in that moment, I was so scared I just kept on walking. I work night shift at a hospital. One night I was heading to the ER, and on my way I passed a walkway leading to the closed attached clinic. It's a pretty wide hallway with comfy chairs along the side for people waiting on the pharmacy at the end of the hall just before the clinic. The lights were out because it was like 3 in the morning, and as I walked by, I happened to glance down the hall and realized there was someone sitting in one of the chairs. I jumped out of my skin and definitely made a rather comical squawking noise. It was when the figure in the chair laughed that I realized it was a security guard on break. I yelled out to him. Once my heart started beating again, "Paul, what are you doing sitting in the dark like a serial killer?" To which he responded, "What? They're comfy." I would watch a log yard at night. Take your pick. Gunshots echoing on the mountain, being stalked by a mountain lion, or packs of wild dogs or coyotes staring at you through the window. And finally, the truckers returning after dark and having an argument until a pistol is pulled. The mountain lion took the cake. I saw movement, so I went to check it out. The manager had taken in a few stray dogs at that point. I couldn't find them. I looked in the doghouse, and all of them were in one, smushed against the back wall and terrified. I knew I had a problem at that point, so I scanned the hillside and spotted the cat watching me. As I walked back to the building, it kept pace and looked like it would pounce at any moment. Safe to say, I went into a room with no windows and stayed there all night. Screw the equipment. Armed robberies. The scariest one was when the assistant manager got hit on the head with a knife for closing the till before they took all the money. He opened the till and they took all the notes. Then he closed it because he thought they were done, but they wanted the change. Another time there was a guy with a sword trying to get in. There's a magnetic lock on the door. People can't get in unless we buzz them in or they give the door a really hard pull. I pulled it open with brute force a few times when I locked myself out. He was pulling on the door and telling us to let him in, but we didn't let him in. Thankfully, he didn't pull hard enough. Wasn't really scary, in a ghost and goblins way, but my first call center job was an overnight e-commerce. Some dude got super mad about something I don't even remember anymore, but gave our exact address and said he'd be waiting outside for us. Police were notified, and we were only allowed to go outside for breaks or to our cars in at least pairs, with a manager watching the break area and parking lot from the front door for a few weeks. I mean, a lot of these spam calls I get all day long kind of make me want to look up some addresses too. Not that I'm gonna kill anybody, but like have a stern talking to. I had been working 2 full-time jobs and riding a bicycle to both of them. I was sleep deprived, and on my way home in the middle of the night I could see the streets, but there was a lot of shadows. As I was moving, the shadows started to friggin' move. They were like water in some places and almost dancing in others. This went on for a few minutes until I got home. I was in a full sweat and just collapsed and slept for a full day. I don't think this was anything more than a hallucination, but to see those shadows move scared the crap out of me. I used to be a supervisor on a midnight crew of a chain restaurant. I was the only man with a crew of girls in their 20s who looked to me like a big brother, or crazy uncle depending on who you asked. One night, one of the girls went outside on a smoke break and saw a black SUV sitting in a dark corner of the parking lot with the lights off, just watching the place. I looked at the cameras, and they had positioned themselves in a blind spot where we couldn't see them unless we went outside. Whoever was in the vehicle had it very well thought out. We had no idea how long they had been sitting there or what they were up to. We eventually found out that it was one of the owners along with someone from upper management in the local chain. They travel from store to store and watch how quickly the drive-thrus are taken care of, etc. They would take a different vehicle every time and hide in different places around the lot. Everyone found it to be creepy, and I came close to calling the police on them once. I used to work security as one of my first jobs. Most of it was events, but they'd pick up the random location gig. I get this overnight job watching a gate where they're building a new major road. Wasn't supposed to be any night construction due to the residential area, but some of the contractors were apparently having shit dropped off at a night or using as a thoroughfare in a few cases. Now, I wasn't supposed to stop them, just take the plate number and company name of any trucks that came through. First night, nothing. I got some sleep. Second night, just as I was about to fall asleep, a truck pulled up, see me parked in the shadows, and leaves. I decided to pull my car into the light directly so maybe them seeing me would stop them from even pulling down the street. I'm the type that once my sleep is interrupted, it takes a while to get back to sleep, so I was poking around a bit. And that's when shit started to get odd. Timeline this like 2000. I start hearing a sound like a TIE fighter. Drones aren't everywhere back then, and even though I was about half a mile from a major military base back then, that sound wouldn't make think drone. That high-pitched electric motor whine just wasn't a normal thing at all, but that's the sound I heard that night, well, similar. So, heat this TIE fighter, whine, and I'm standing on the edge of the canyon they're building this road on. Can't see anything, just this alien sound, close then far, close then far. There was some sort of industrial park down in the canyon they were attaching this road to, exterior lights on. Then they just went off one by one while the sound seemed like it was in that area. Sound went away, all the lights came back on. A few minutes later, that sound is back on my side of the canyon. It wasn't a foggy evening, decently clear, but I can't see anything in the sky. That sound is getting louder, and I started to get a little freaked out, so I locked myself in my car. That drone-like sound got really effing loud, seemingly right above me, and the streetlight I was under went out. Whatever it was pushing some air, because I could feel it hitting my car at that point, but I wasn't seeing anything out the window. It got really effing loud for a minute, still just stars above me, or as much starlight as you can see in the middle of a city, then silence, and the streetlight came back on. Told my boss the next morning to reassign me.